Islam is the fastest growing religion in the United States, and there are more than 1,200 mosques around the country, with at least one in every state. The vast majority are in major metropolitan areas, especially in New York and California. But America's first mosque was built in one of the least populous states, North Dakota. Like many immigrants, the Lebanese who arrived on the flat plains of North Dakota in the early years of the 20th century came in search of economic opportunity. Hassan Abdullah says his parents didn't plan to stay.
They always talk about they came to the United States and they were going to get rich and go back to Lebanon. It didn't work out that way. Nobody got rich. We had 7 years of drought right off the bat.
The Abdullahs weren't the only ones who came here from Lebanon, hoping to make their fortune and go back home.
A bunch of them came, not at once, but they kept coming, helped each other out, so on. Well, there was quite a few here years ago.
And sometime around 1929 or 1930, when they realized they would be staying in North Dakota, working as farmers and raising their families here, the Lebanese community decided to build a mosque.
What they built was essentially a building that would keep them warm.
Joan Mandel is a filmmaker who has documented Arab communities across the United States. She's currently working on a film about Arab Americans in North Dakota.
They didn't have indoors heating in those days, and can you imagine people coming from this warm Mediterranean climate and ending up in northwest North Dakota in the middle of the winter? North Dakota is really, really windy, so they built a basement, and actually the building was just a really rough wood building, I don't know, maybe about 4 feet over the ground.
Although he was just a young boy when the mosque was being used, Hassan Abdullah remembers it well.
It was huge down the basement. It was really big. Where they prayed, they'd line up, the men would pray and the women would sit off to the side. Us kids would go outside and wrestle. I always thought there was probably 15 or 16 old-timers that stood in line and prayed. Every Friday they got together. Buggies and wagons and horses and whatever. Hardly anybody had a car back in the 30s. They all got together and prayed for rain. And we had an accident before we got home. The rain so hard. So I always figured that helped.
The old-timers Mr. Abdullah talks about are now long gone, most of them buried in the Muslim cemetery that adjoined the mosque. Most of their children, who grew up in and around the small towns of Ross and Stanley, moved away. Now 80, Hassan Abdullah is one of the few Muslims still living in the area. He says by the 1940s, no one was using the mosque anymore. In the 1970s, the community members voted to tear it down.
We shouldn't have torn it down, really, but we thought it looked eyesore, they said. All we had to do was make it look better, and it would have been kept it. But they voted to tear it down.
The Muslim community voted, or the town of Ross?
The younger generation. I think I was the oldest one there. But, I didn't say much. It looked so empty after we tore it down.
But not anymore. At the urging of Mr. Abdullah's sister Sarah Omar, who died last year, a new mosque was built where the old one stood. About 80 people attended the commemoration this summer, half the size of the original mosque, but above ground. The building is made of concrete faced with red stone, topped with a bronze dome. Inside are 4 minarets waiting to be put on the corners of the building, and a framed poster bearing images of all the dead who are buried in the cemetery.
There's Mom and Dad. There's a brother-in-law, my oldest sister. This is the one that had this built.
And does anybody use it anymore for prayer?
No, I see a few prayers every once in a while here.
But Hassan Abdullah says the new building is more a memorial than a mosque. According to documentary filmmaker Joan Mandel, the second mosque in the United States was built 5 years after the one in Ross, North Dakota, by immigrants to Rapid City, Iowa, and it is still standing.
You'll come into a nice little quiet residential community, and right in the middle is a mosque, which is a simple white frame building and almost looks like a house, but with a big green dome on it. People refer to that as the first mosque. So it's really the first mosque that's still standing.
But the filmmaker says no one, including the Muslim community of Rapid City, has come forward to challenge North Dakota's claim as the home of America's first Mosque. I'm Susan Logue.